Welcome to the only guide you'll need for the AQA English Language Paper 2. Here's a guide for the AQA GCSE English Language Paper 2. Question 4. Need any help with other questions? Check out the rest of the series or head to the Oxbridge GCSE Tutor channel, the mothership of all things GCSE. Welcome to the full deep dive guide. Let's look at the various parts in detail. If you already know what we're covering, feel free to skip ahead at any time. There are two ways to do this. Okay, number one, did you know you can skip backwards and forwards 5 seconds at a time by tapping left and right on the keyboard arrows or by double tapping either side of the screen on a phone? Easy. You can also skip totally to the next or a particular section by using the timestamps listed in the video description below. Click on them to jump to or revisit any sections that you need. Still going too fast or too slow for you? Did you know you can also adjust the video speed in the settings like this? If there's anything else that you want explained better, drop it in the comments. It'll help me decide what to make next. So this is a question where you must compare perspectives from a modern extract with a 19th century extract. In this guide, you're going to learn how to understand the question, what is a comparison question, what makes a good comparison, the comparison question hack, this is where the real magic is, written examples of the comparison hack, what are the writer's methods, what to do in the exam, writing up your comparisons quickly, and what you should do now after watching the video. Part A, understand the question. So did you know that an English GCSE exam question will have multiple things that you need to complete? And they're not just detailed in the question bullet points, so keep watching to find out why. You should always read the question carefully, highlight and underline the individual tasks, then make a mental or written checklist that you can tick off for maximum marks. So let's do this for an example of question 4. Sample question. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. Compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures in the mountains. In your answer, you could compare their different feelings and perspectives on their adventures, compare the methods the writers use to convey their feelings and perspectives, support your response with references to both texts. This is an 18-mark question, which should take about 24 minutes. It's roughly about 90 seconds per mark. Notice that I've underlined the hidden tasks that make up the 100% of the question. Right, let's make a checklist of them here. You don't obviously need to create a table like this in the exam because you can just tick them off on the exam paper like this as you complete them. As we can see on the left-hand side, we've got the items on the checklist. So let's look at whole of each source. What does that mean? Well, it basically means that your quotes must be spread out and taken from across the whole of each text. Don't make that mistake of taking all your quotes from the top or the bottom. They need to be from everywhere. Writers' different feelings and perspectives. In other words, what emotions does the writer express and what opinions do they have or imply? We'll go into this in a little bit more detail later. Quotes as evidence. I think everybody here knows that we need to use quotes as evidence. So we need to focus on analyzing single key words. Single, that's important. One key word on its own, or very short phrases in rare circumstances. Writer's methods. How does a writer use language, structure, or what emotional effect do they create? And finally, references. These will be mainly quotes, but can also be descriptions of what the writer is doing. See, there's more to this question than you think. If you miss any part, your grade could get capped, and that's going to hurt. There's also another crucial thing to understand. B. What is a comparison question? In a GCSE English language comparison question, always analyze both texts in each paragraph. Never write about the two texts in two separate halves of your response. The right way. Notice how each paragraph discusses both texts. The wrong way. This is when pupils write about source A in the first half of an essay and then write about source B in the second half of the essay. This is not actually comparing ideas at a high level. It's just two separate analyses of two different texts. In this wrong example, the pupil has completely separated the analyses into two different halves of the response. Never ever write about the two texts in two separate halves of your response. Section C, what makes a good comparison? You'll also get more marks if you think about how you compare. Not all comparisons are equal. Let's say you're a car journalist, for example, and you're comparing two cars. You wouldn't compare the styling of one car with the comfort of the other. Instead, you would look for areas that you would compare, like this: the styling of car A compared to the styling of car B, the performance of car A compared to the performance of car B, or the comfort of car A and the comfort of car B. What this tells us is that we need to compare things that are similar. The problem question 4 in the AQA GCSE English Language Paper is that the extracts can be about anything, and that you must find and compare ideas hidden in different parts of the extracts, organize and write them up all in 24 minutes. That's a big ask. But keep watching, because I've got a really clever hack that works no matter what the extracts are about. Section D, the comparison question hack. So in the question 4 extracts, look for these things. Number 1, how do their attitudes and emotions begin? What are their opinions about or their emotions about in the middle? And then how do their attitudes and emotions end? Right, why does this work? It just seems so simple. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute, but the first thing you need to understand is that the question doesn't ask for techniques, but instead it requires you to comment on the writer's method, which could include things like language techniques and effects, but also it allows you to write about how the writer uses structure. So it's not like in your other questions where you have to pick out names of techniques. It can be anything that the writer does to create an effect. And that's why this hack works. In case you've forgotten, structure analysis is about how the writer organizes their ideas into a particular order. In other words, how it begins, develops in the middle, and ends, which allows us to use this magical hack. This also helps you to meet the requirement for looking at the whole of each text. Genius. So you just need to learn and revise this. Beginning, middle, end. Section E, written examples of the comparison hack. Now let's look at each part of the question 4 hack in action. Right, hack part 1. How do their attitudes and emotions begin? Look for each writer's thoughts at the beginning of the text. They'll either be positive or negative. Okay, quickly pause this video and read the beginning of source A. The words and phrases that are highlighted suggest that the train journey has been a boring and dreadful experience. We'll use this turquoise one. In this quote, we can notice that source A begins negatively. No more days entirely blank of action. This implies that he's been bored on the train, with blank implying that he's got nothing to do. Therefore, this suggests he cannot wait to get off the train. Okay, let's look at source B. Pause this video and read through the beginning of source B. The words and phrases that are highlighted here suggest that the train journey was exciting. We'll use this turquoise one. In this quote, we can notice that source B begins positively. A party of 16 persons was ushered. Ushered creates an image of attending an exciting new event or show. Therefore, this suggests she cannot wait to get on the train. So here, it's easy to see that each text begins in a contrasting way. Contrasting means opposite way. If they both begin with the same tone, then just explain that both begin positively or negatively. But in these sources, source A cannot wait to get off the train, and source B cannot wait to get on the train. So we're comparing the idea of getting on and off at the beginning of the story. The examiners make this easy for you by having two texts that are very similar with lots of comparisons for you to make. This is how we could write them up. Entirely blank in No More Days Entirely Blank of Action begins source A with a sense of boredom and frustration, suggesting the writer cannot wait to get off the train. Whereas ushered begins source B with connotations of eagerness and being directed to an exciting event, suggesting that this writer is thrilled and cannot wait to get on the train. A quick note about techniques. Notice that we haven't mentioned that entirely blank is a metaphor and a hyperbole, nor that ushered is an emotive verb. You can if you want to, and we will pick out language techniques later in other examples, but because we haven't commented on how each text begins, it qualifies as structure analysis and therefore as a writer's method. The method in this case is how the writer began each extract, Remember, structure analysis is about how the ideas in a text are organized, which includes how a writer begins, ends, or develops the ideas in the middle. We'll talk more about writers' methods and techniques a little later. If language structure and form confuse the hell out of you, visit the links in the description to 3 totally free web pages I've created on my website to help you. Now, back to my incredible hack for question 4. Let's look at the second part of the hack. What are their opinions and emotions in the middle? You'll get most of your examples from here. This will probably be about the writer's opinions and reactions about the main subject topic, opinions and reactions about other characters, it could be opinions and reactions about events, and literally anything else that the writers may have thoughts and feelings about. The extracts that we looked at earlier continue to include other ideas that we can use, such as source A thinks the train acts against him. Source B thinks the train serves her faithfully. The similar thing here is that they both have an opinion and feelings about a train, but it's their opinions that are different. You'll see this pattern in all the others. Source A uses a short sentence to express excitement about the train. Source B uses a short sentence to depict irritation about the train. Here, they use a similar technique, but differently. A is scared by the train's behavior. B is not excited by the train's behavior. A personifies the train positively, and B personifies the train negatively. A uses snorting to suggest the train is defiant. B uses snorting to imply the train is cute. Because this is the middle of the extract, we'll need to comment on language and/or other structure techniques. Remember, if you use this hack, it'll automatically write about structure when you analyze how each extract begins or ends, because structure is about how ideas in a text are ordered. If you look at the comparisons, it can't help but analyze techniques. Here's an example of one of the above written up as a paragraph. The personification of the train with a defiant and naughty look suggests source A thinks the train is acting consciously against them. However, source B thinks the train serves her faithfully in the zoomorphism, brave little she-dragon of ours. Remember, question 4 doesn't actually ask for techniques. You just need to write about the writer's methods somewhere. Write 8 short paragraphs like these. Part F. So what are writers' methods? Writers' methods are anything that the writer does on purpose to create an effect, like emotions or tones, such as tension. Therefore, writers' methods can be through structure or language analysis, but could even be a simple discussion of what emotional effect or tone the writer is trying to create during the entire text, or the emotional effect that is created in a specific moment. We'll have a look at some examples now. So here's an example of writers' methods as a simple discussion of the emotional effect the writer is trying to create during the entire text. When the train crashes in source A, the tension rises from the opening sense of boredom to eventually fall again when the writer feels as if he's defeated the train. In contrast, the excitement in source B begins high with the anticipation of riding the train and stays high during the enjoyable ride. Notice there's no quotes here, instead just a description of events that serve as evidence. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of this whole video, I said that evidence can be quotes and it can also be a description of things that the writer is doing. In case you're wondering, the emotional effect in A is a rising and falling of tension. The emotional effect in B is the consistent sense of excitement. Now here's an example of the writer's method as an emotional effect that's created in a specific moment. Source A describes a frightful jarring followed by a crash to convey his sense of alarm to readers, whereas source B writes a sensation of flying was quite delightful to allow readers to share her wonder. Notice, again, I've named no techniques, no keywords are picked out. Instead, we focus on the emotional effects of the writer's alarm and wonder. Let's quickly head back to look at the third and final part of the hack. We did move to part F, but I just quickly want to skip back and finish off with some examples of how we can analyze the end of extracts before we move back towards part G. Right, so this is part 3 of the hack. What are their opinions and emotions at the end? Now, the process for this is exactly the same as looking for comparisons at the beginning, but you're just looking at the end instead. Let's look at the end of source A. Pause the video for a second just to read what's here and have a look at what I've highlighted and see the tone is very negative. Now let's look at the end of source B. Pause the video here and have a quick read. Notice what I've highlighted and notice that this has a different emotional tone, which is positive. we can see that A ends on a negative image of the train and B ends on a positive image of the train. Here's a written paragraph with the two texts compared. A ends with a monstrous depiction of the train in the zoomorphism thick black worm without a head, whereas B ends with a positive depiction of the train with the simile swifter than a bird flies. You can see I've decided to add in techniques names here, but you don't need to because you're writing about how the text ends, and this is part of structural analysis. This brings us on to part G. What to do in the exam. Now, in the exam, you've walked in, you've sat down. Remember the golden rule about comparisons. Always analyze both texts in each paragraph. Never write about the two texts in two separate halves of your response. Step 2. Quickly scribble down the hack, beginning, middle, end, in the top corner of the exam paper if you're likely to forget it. Take out the paperclip and place the two sources side by side if you can. Use the beginning, middle, end hack. Highlight anything from the beginning, middle, and end of source A that answers the question. Focus on keywords and phrases. Do not look for techniques yet, as they may not answer the question. Then do the same for source B. Now we need to see which ideas match. Look for any similarities in the middle sections of both sources. The beginning and end of the text are the easiest. You'll need 8 comparisons in total. Match your ideas up using a numbering system like this. This will be the plan for your response. And then finally, if you need to, annotate any additional ideas onto the paper just to remind yourself what you want to write about. Finally, it's time to write up your comparisons. Part H. Writing up your comparisons quickly. Now remember, you've only got 24 minutes in total. That's 10 minutes to read, highlight and match up 8 pairs of ideas and 14 minutes to write them up. So to write 8 comparisons, you're going to need a snappy and quick way to write the answers. Let's quickly look at how to write your answers in a snappy way. Now, this is a subject for a whole other video, but let's quickly look at how to write your answers in a snappy way. You may have been taught to write an overall point like this. Both writers use imagery of animals to describe their trains. The overall point is bold and underlined here for you. So if you need to pause it and read and see how that overall point connects to the 2 bits of analysis. Now, this is great if you are writing a full essay for a Shakespeare question or other literature GCSE question, but you're not writing an essay here. Writing an overall point repeatedly wastes valuable time. You're going to end up writing 8 points, which could mean you could analyze a couple of more quotes in that same time. So don't do this. Here's how to write your answers in a snappy way. You'll notice that I don't write an overall point to save time. In fact, my point is actually just combined into my analysis after the quote. A ends with a monstrous depiction of the train in the zoomorphism thick black worm without a head, whereas B ends with a positive depiction of the train with the simile swifter than a bird flies. Let's compare them both side by side. I want you to understand that examiners don't really like overly strict PEA, Peter, Peel, or any other type of structured paragraph that your teachers are trying to teach you in English. It might be different for history and it might be different for geography, but for English, examiners think it's robotic and repetitive and doesn't really allow you guys to answer and analyze freely. But you still need evidence and it needs to be analyzed in the right way. So here's the point. Here is the effect, which understands and explains emotions. Here is the evidence. And here are the techniques. A big part of English is knowing how to write in a particular way in a particular situation. And a 24-minute question is not the place to write super long PEA paragraphs. And that's the guide. Let's have a look what you need to do after this guide. The final part, what you should do now. Okay, let's be honest, there's a lot of information there. You'll probably have to watch this video again. But this time, note down the things you need to learn, pausing the video as you go along. Revise and learn the golden rule about comparisons, learn the hack I gave you, and then practice, practice, practice. And here's an idea for your first practice. Why don't you just attempt the question that we covered in this video about the trains? It'll be an easier first attempt. Obviously, don't look at the answers while you're doing the question. Just try to remember the examples the best you can from this guide, or even find new ideas using my hack. There are links to the exam paper and the extracts about trains in the description below. Once you've done this first easy practice, then work through the past papers using my hack against the clock. You can find lots of them on the AQA website. Remember, it's a 24-minute question, so if you're short of time, practice finding, highlighting, and matching up quotes within 10 minutes for as many past paper questions as you can. You can then practice writing up maybe 2 or 3 of those numbered plans within 14 minutes, the remaining time which you'll have in the exam after the planning stage. Now, if you've got plenty of time and you're super organized, then practice as many questions as you can fully and against a 24-minute timer. Still stuck? Want your revision organized for you? Take my short course. Everything you need to nail the paper and get the grade you actually want. Now, these videos take over 50 hours to research, write, and make. So if you do take the course, a big thank you. You're supporting the channel. So head over to Oxbridge GCSE Tutor to check out all the extra help waiting for you there. Hit subscribe, tap the bell for quick access to everything that'll help you smash your GCSEs. Got a topic you want covered? Drop it in the comments. Now, here's some videos you should definitely watch next.